Yemen has always been a difficult place to conquer. Many superpowers tried to take over Yemen due to its strategic location, but only a few succeeded in conquering Yemen without allowing the Yemenis to have autonomy. Even the Ottomans failed to gain full control over Yemen. The Yemenis rebelled against the Ottomans many times, and eventually the Ottomans gave up trying to conquer Yemen and instead made agreements with the Yemeni kings, Zaydi imams and tribal leaders, recognizing their autonomy. The British conquered Yemen in the 1800s. During this time, the British were looking for a coal depot to service their steamers en route to India. It took 700 tons of coal for a round trip from the Suez Canal to Bombay. Therefore, the British needed a more convenient shipping port. The East India Company officials decided that Aden in Yemen should be this port because of its convenient location. Aden would be a great shipping port for the British as it was easily accessible from India. The British conquered Aden in 1839. After Sultan Abdul Majid I ascended to the Ottoman throne in 1839, he issued a decree to the British stating that they could set up a coal depot in Yemen. In 1839, one of the British ships sank near the Gulf of Aden, and Arab tribesmen boarded it and plundered its contents. The British government then dispatched a warship with 300 soldiers under the command of Captain Haynes to demand compensation. The captain appealed to the Sultan of Lahaj, who happened to be in Aden at the time. The Sultan refused to give in to British demands on the grounds that pirates were not the responsibility of governing authorities of the land. When Captain Haynes mentioned the Ottoman Sultan's agreement, the Sultan of Lahaj stated, "Who is this Ottoman Sultan, and what right has he to give away the land of others?" This shocked the British, and they had realized that the Yemenis had autonomy from the Ottoman Empire. Having failed to convince the Sultan, Captain Haynes bombarded Aden from his warship on 19th January 1839. The ruler of Lahaj ordered his guards to defend the port, but they failed. The British now occupied Aden and agreed to compensate the Sultan with an annual payment of 6,000 riyals. Angered by the occupation, the Arabs of the region sought to evict the British by force, but to no avail. For example, in November 1839, 5,000 Arab tribesmen tried to retake the town but were repulsed and 200 were killed. Another equally large attack followed in May 1840 with similar results. The Yemeni Fadli tribe assisted the Abdali tribe, and between them they sustained 300 casualties. To punish the Fadli tribe for joining the rebellion, Captain Haynes blockaded their coast and cut off their supplies from Aden. This policy was enforced until the Fadlis made peace. In order to remain in power, the British used the divide and rule policy and maintained close relationships with various wealthy Yemeni tribes such as the Abdali tribe. The friendship between the English and the Abdali tribe, however, earned them the enmity of the Fadli and the Aqrabi tribes, and the distrust of others who accused the Sultan of becoming an infidel, thus providing them with an excuse to quarrel with him. The resistance from the various tribes of Yemen was so intense that the Abdali tribe was still unable to protect the roads leading to Aden, which was expected of them. The resentment to the British by various Yemeni tribes was as a result of policies such as the diversion of trade from other smaller ports to Aden and the appropriation of local water wells. A number of incidents involving the murder of British officers and attendants aggravated relations between the resident at Aden and his neighbors to the north during this long period of interaction. In March 1851, Captain Milner of the Aden Agency was killed while on a hunting expedition close to Lahaj. This, however, was not the only incident reflecting disaffection with the British presence. There were reports of Arabs firing on British commercial ships and of killings of sailors and officers in 1851. Friction at the popular level led to British sailors and officers being murdered and to the Sultan refusing to hand over the murderers for execution. This friction and tension between the British and the Yemeni tribes continued throughout the 1800s and the early 1900s. However, in the 1950s, huge tribal rebellion broke out against the British due to oppressive policies such as unfair taxation and agricultural policies. These rebellions, however, were much more fierce than the ones in the 1800s, due to the Yemenis having access to more advanced weapons which were imported from Arab nationalists in Egypt. In order to suppress the rebellion, the British used brutal methods such as purposefully targeting civilian livelihoods. The British wanted civilians to suffer because they believed that civilian suffering would force tribal leaders to surrender. British operations therefore involved driving the population from their homes, burning food stores, destroying crops, and killing livestock. British actions created a humanitarian crisis as thousands of refugees fled the violence. After these tribal rebellions were violently crushed by the British, another more fierce rebellion broke out in the 1960s. This time it was not just tribal leaders who rebelled. This rebellion consisted of tribal groups and also of well-organized political groups such as the NLF. In all parts of Yemen, there was an awakening. The British had finally been kicked out of Yemen. Britain's withdrawal from Yemen in 1967 was humiliating for the British.